Good morning, everyone. Welcome to day two of the Governor's Capital Budget Hearing. My name is James Gary. I'm the state's budget director. And for those of you who were not here yesterday, how this works is we're going to call you up at your scheduled time. Because this is a noticed meeting, that we cannot put you on before your scheduled time. So if things and quicker than the schedule predicted, then we just take a few minute break between sessions. So if you're here thinking, well, if it goes quicker, I should be there, you don't have to be. So just be there at your appointed time. It'll either be that or maybe a few minutes later, but we try to stick on schedule. So with that, I'd like to start with our first presentation, which will be from the Department of Environmental Services. Good morning.
Good morning. For the record, I'm Bob Scott, Commissioner with the Department of Environmental Services. With me is Susan Carlson, our Chief Operating Officer, and it's nice to meet you in person.
Nice to meet you as well.
So you should have some handouts from the department. If it's the will of the group here, I will briefly summarize each section. So the first section I'd like to talk about is our request for IT infrastructure. We have really 5 subsets of that. The major subset is what we're calling phase 2, or a continuation of the work we're doing on consolidating our over 200 separate databases and 1 million documents that we have for the department. We currently are going through phase 1 right now, which is the less than glamorous work of getting everything formatted in consistent ways so that they can talk, that there can be linkages with the databases. We're very interested in taking that to the next phase in order to provide more transparent service to our many customers. So the one-stop, just to give you some background, a couple times we've had to be offline for various reasons to improve it. One of them was for cybersecurity vulnerabilities. And we immediately got many calls from both citizens looking to look at environmental data, but also for a lot of consultants, a lot of industry work goes on. They depend on, at this point, they like the online service that provides rather than having to come in and look at documents directly. So for many reasons, we're very interested in that work to move ahead on our customer service, if you will. So that cuts a lot of ways. It also is less impactful to staff as we move forward also. Another part of this request is for our ongoing work to upgrade our air monitoring stations. So we have a network of a dozen stations throughout the state where we measure different air quality aspects, and we report that to our citizens as well as the federal government. So you may occasionally, it's less prevalent, thankfully, for New Hampshire now, but occasionally you hear about Air Quality Action Day, and that's coming off that network. So we are continuing to want to do upgrades to that to make that more efficient. We're also, part of this request now is to include a mobile calibration unit. With the march of technology, we're looking at what we're calling microtype stations, which will basically be a lot more cost effective and less energy used, et cetera. The only downside, which I don't think is a downside, is there's no room in the structure to actually co-locate calibration equipment. So we want to move to the next level of that and have a mobile unit that can do the calibrations and not have separate calibration equipment at the different sites. The next issue we'd like to address through IT is our subsurface program, which is code for septic tanks. We have over 48 years of hard paper records that the public needs to get at, the installers need to get at, our staff need to get at. That needs to be digitized. So that would be that service would be of great value to pretty much everybody who's involved with that type of work. And then our Limnology Lab is all the work that that's done in the field that comes back for lab analysis is all currently in a single access, which is an old Microsoft product database that is not particularly functional. Again, just like our one-stop data, we want the public, our staff, to be able to readily access that, and that needs updating. And finally, our pools and spa program, which we had legislation to revamp that, unfortunately, as a result of a Legionella outbreak back in 2018-19 at Hampton Beach, where we had some deaths caused by improperly maintained spas. So that's right now we have a single database and only one person at a time can actually access. We want to have that so again the public can access it, the towns can do some of this work for inspections so that they can access it, and certainly so the public can register online and do their certification. So that's in need of work also. So that's part of that IT request item that you see. The next item is a groundwater monitoring well expansion. So we have a network of 30 groundwater monitoring stations throughout the state. We use the data from that to help us predict and monitor drought conditions, especially. What's come of that, the past 2 years, we've seen severe droughts in especially the North Country, and now we're seeing actually we're currently in lower moderate drought conditions in the seacoast. Those two areas we have gaps in that system, so we don't have as many monitoring wells, and the monitoring wells we have by and large are not bedrock wells that we actually need to see. So we're envisioning kind of filling those gaps, and that will allow us to help work with the public, work with impacted communities on a more timely basis for drought conditions. The third issue we have is for the Israel River ice control structure, and we've lumped that with, which is $500,000. We've lumped that with a hydrologic data collection network, which is, I'll start with that one. That is basically allowing us to do further automation and understanding of our flow conditions and to help manage the dams better and also be more predictive on flood conditions. So that's what that upgrade is about. The Israel Ice River Control Structure is in Lancaster. There's a long storied history with that. It's actually Army Corps of Engineers installed it. Never quite worked as it was envisioned. It's not been maintained, and now we're at the point now where, thankfully, for DOT is the bridge downstream of that is now large enough so it doesn't clog ice dams, and between the lack of maintenance being in disrepair and the bridge taking away the issue, we're ready to have that removed. Right now, it's both a public safety hazard and it is supposed to control ice. It actually collects ice, so that's a bad thing, we think. The fourth and fifth items are our state revolving loan fund match for clean water, which is code for wastewater and stormwater, and drinking water. So those are longstanding programs. Typically, we have requests in to match. There's always a match requirement for the federal money that comes in. The difference this year is with the infrastructure bill, there's a significant increase in the amount of match needed because they're giving us a lot more money. And I think we all agree that this is money well spent as far as we don't want to be giving federal money back. The good news, too, is the first tranche of that, the 22-23, only requires 10% match rather than the traditional 20% match. But that's what that request is. So I do want to point out that House Bill 1421, which was amended after we had submitted this, includes $7.76 million out of the state surplus to match. So assuming that's signed, which I have no reason to believe it's not going to be, then that request can come down by that $7.76 million. The next item on our list is the Baker Flood Control Dam rehabilitation. That is Again, it's an older dam, as I guess you could say that about almost all of our over 200 dams we maintain. And that was originally built by the Natural Resources Conservation Service. They have a program where they will help pay both some of the assessment and engineering design work, but also they'll pay up to 65% of the rehabilitation cost. This is a case where originally the work was scheduled to be done in 2016, and we had some funds, 3.9 million, appropriated then in the march of time, and the dam deteriorating. Now the cost, now that the feds are ready for that, the cost has increased. So between the 3.9 million appropriation we have already and what the feds are putting in their 65%, we still need an additional $11.8 million for that. Our seventh request is for the Winnipesaukee River Basin. So just a reminder that we run and manage that program. We run the wastewater treatment facility and the collection lines for those 10 communities that are involved. This is a user service. There's no general fund monies in here, and there's no bonding for state monies here. But it does, obviously, being a state thing, it goes through you all. So they are looking to, as part of their normal upgrades and replacing of old lines that are breaking, they're looking at 2.5 miles of force main to be replaced on Route 140 in Belmont, and about 1,300 feet of force main in Laconia. And our last, did I miss one here? I guess not. No, I guess I didn't. So our last request has to do with our office space and our modular furniture. We have most of our wings on our floor on Hazen Drive have been converted to modular furniture in order to maximize usable space for staff. In the march of time, and especially with the infrastructure monies, we have a fair number of temporary positions that we've had to add and will be adding. And we don't want to be leasing more space for that. We'd like to convert. We have one floor that's not converted to workstations now, so that will allow us to maximize that floor by adding modular furniture to that space. So with that, again, I can certainly go into as much detail as the group would like. I see I have 3 minutes. So.
Representative?
Thank you. Other than Winnipesaukee, is all the rest of this general fund bonding? It would be very helpful if you differentiated that, because when you start looking at a $50 million plus or minus request out of 100, and I think the governor said 125 million yesterday. So which are general funds and which are other funds would be helpful, I think, for anybody who's trying to put this whole package together.
The only other one besides Winnie is the Baker Flood Control Dam Rehabilitation. It's 65% federal, 35% state. All the rest of the requests are straight up general funds. Our ask is on the total. So we would be, of that total, 7.8 million is federal for the Baker River, 6.7 million for Winnipesaukee is other funded, and the balance is all general funds.
Thank you.
For your fourth and fifth, the clean water and drinking water, you have roughly 38 million of general fund revenue with, I believe, 281 million of federal funds coming in. Could you just briefly, because we, you know, as you point out, the time is limited, talk about what specifically that money is going for? What are you purchasing with that 310 million roughly?
Sure. Again, this is match money for federal state revolving loan funds. So this provides low interest loans, and with the infrastructure bill, depending on the community, it can be up to 49% loan forgiveness. There's always a certain amount of loan forgiveness. So these are drinking water projects. So it could be upgrades to treatment plants. It could be upgrades to pipes. It could be new pipes. Same thing for wastewater treatment. This sounds like a lot of money. Our assessment, which it is, our assessment though for the needs in the state is over $2 billion. So it's all relative, I guess, right? You know.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for coming in.
Morning.
On your IT infrastructure plan, are all of these, individual items working under an umbrella of some system? Or are these all individual?
So a few things I'll point out since Commissioner Goulet is sitting next to you. We work very closely with the DOIT as part of our overall plans, and we make sure what we're doing matches their assessments of the needs also. And then we also have a planning unit we set up within the department, so we are able to prioritize and make sure it's within the scope of the department. And for whatever better word, that way that prevents what we hope. Those two things prevents the left hand not knowing what the right hand doing, because at the end of the day, we want a combined system that works all together with, and including with long term, whatever the state ends up doing, if you will.
I guess my question is, you're asking for a request for phase 2.
Correct.
Does that have anything to do with digitizing historical subsurface documents?
We've broken that
They're
out.
separate,
Right.
right? So I guess my question then is, this is coming in as one ask for 6.5 million. Could you let us know how much each individual?
You know, go ahead. Yep.
And if it's possible that, you could be funded for some, but not all.
Yes, in our original submittal, we had a detailed memo explaining each piece of it. The one-stop phase 2 is $5,051,000. The air monitoring is $396,000. The digitizing of the subsurface documents is estimated at $800,000. And the updates to the laboratory and pools and spas is $300,000, and each of those is individually $150,000.
Thank you.
Commissioner.
So thank you for that. That's actually very helpful to see the line items, and it is a very detailed memo. My question is about the SRF matches. Am I right? Those are, this isn't in your best interest to answer correctly, but are they scalable? That is to say, we can, if we did, and I'm not suggesting this, but we did half of it, we would get half the federal money. If we did 2/3 of it, we get 2/3 of federal money.
Correct. And again,
And you have a backlog of like 2 billion, and this would get you 300 million of that 2 billion, right?
right. And again, the we is the communities and the water systems. This is money that we don't keep. It goes out to the water systems for projects. So.
And it's, you said there's a backlog of about 2 billion. Are those literally identified projects, or?
No, that was an assessment without going into, gee, we need to expand here for future development, but with just the existing infrastructure we have, that was the current assessment of the needs. Again, not to go into too much detail, but when there's a geyser on Main Street is not probably the most cost-effective way to fix that, but we know the condition and that type of thing, so we work with the community. So that's basically an assessment, but not a here's itemized people are ready to give us anything. We
How
did.
does- Go ahead.
If I could, we do an annual solicitation for pre-applications. Last year, we got, just for people ready to actually execute, then we had over $1 billion in requests for applications last year.
Nice. How does this dovetail at all into the, the state through the Drinking Water Trust, or whatever we call that? I don't remember anymore.
Sure.
Is sort of expanding and improving the state's drinking water infrastructure, and more pipes, fewer wells, probably. But does this dovetail a little bit with that?
It does. The same. Our staff work very closely. We have the Drinking Water Groundwater Trust Fund, which thankfully can be used to do things that the SRF can't do, like expanding for economic development, that type of thing. We have been using ARPA money and matching the SRF to make it go farther also. So we've been sending up that solicitation for $1 billion. We've been, with the amount of money we have, which is not as much, we've been sending, and we have right now, we have 233 offers out to different communities saying, here's good news. You asked for this much in loan. We're going to be able to give you this much in ARPA grant and this much in loan to kind of make it go farther. So to answer your question, the same staff are all working together. So some communities, gee, what you want to do, you really can't use this funds, but you can use that funds. So we're kind of leveraging that, and we strongly encourage them also to take advantage of other funding like rural development funds or Northern Borders, and kind of do a mix and match.
Do you have a sense of this is an unfair question. I'll preface it by saying that. Do you have a sense of the total value of the state, the combined capital worth of the state water infrastructure?
No,
Okay. But a lot more than 2 billion.
I would think so, yes.
Okay.
Sherry?
Good morning. I have two questions. One, you had said that this request, this is on the clean water, drinking water as well, that this is an increase over the last biennium, primarily as a result of the federal infrastructure bill. This request totals around 38 million of just those two. How much of an increase is that over the last capital budget request?
Good.
Any
Last year,
estimate on that?
It's more than double.
More, okay, I just had no reference for that.
Yeah,
Okay.
essentially, we are getting more than the supplemental funds we're getting through the infrastructure bill is more than double our normal grants.
And then my second part is on the second bullet. It talks about that the committed funds must be identified prior to EPA awarding the grants. What's their timeline that you have to have those projects in so they could do those awards? Is there a set time at a certain point in the year?
There is a set time, but it's based on the federal budget, and the federal budget right now is not done and on a timely basis, so it varies.
Okay.
So we are right now on the FY22. We have exactly 3 months left before we lose those funds.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to invite Commissioner Mason and Fish and Game for their presentation. Morning.
Morning. For the record, I am Executive Director Scott Mason, New Hampshire Fish and Game. I brought with me Josh Davis, Chief of our Facilities and Lands Division. We would like to request $1 million for design of our final hatchery construction project that we've begun. We have applied and received $55 million of ARPA money already to construct 2 hatcheries. That will bring us, the plan is that we would finish up constructing a 3rd hatchery and rebuilding a 4th hatchery. So at this point, we would like to request $1 million to do that final design work on those 2 hatcheries. We've also requesting $200,000 for our hatchery infrastructure improvements. We will be building, our hatcheries are fairly well worn out. And for example, this year we spent about $265,000 on major repairs at our hatcheries. And basically we're trying to change the tire without stopping the car as we roll down the road. We're trying to maintain our production as we go. So we know that we will have some major repair work to keep the existing hatcheries in production as we construct new hatcheries to replace them. The two that we'll be building, the finish date is anticipated being December of 2026. The next request is for $250,000 for headquarters roof repair. Like some other state buildings, we have some major leaks in our roof at our headquarters building, and we would like to get the trash cans out of the hallway and try to try to get the roof leaks fixed. We also have had a problem at our Gibner Center, the Hugh Gregg Coastal Conservation Center down in Greenland. That was built with a heat pump system, and two of those pumps have failed, and we believe the third one is aging to the point where it would make sense to replace all three. And then our last request is for $50,000 to go in and replace what we call a Coast Guard dock, which is where we house our boats that we use on the ocean. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I have one. With on the hatcheries, with the aging hatcheries and the problems you've had in maintaining them because of their age, have you noticed or have the state noticed any drop in production from them that would be noticeable to an avid fisherman?
Well, so far we've been able to get there fast enough to fix problems that would create those types of drastic drops in production. This year, our big issue were wells, well pump failures. And working with our contractor, we were able to keep the wells running and keep the water flowing. So no, we have not directly from equipment failure. One of the big problems we have at our hatcheries right now, and have continued to have, is predators. There's a family of otters over in New Durham that are quite happy and fat right now and ate 6,000 trout inside of a week.
Wow.
Other than the hatchery design, all the rest of the items you listed are going to be funded
Fishing
through
game fund.
Fish and Game Fund, okay. And a follow-on to the hatchery, if you get the $1 million, the assumption then is that the legislature in the following biennium will pony up $30+ million.
That's what we're hoping for.
Can you talk a little bit about, if I understand what you said before, and I'm ignoring the Fish and Game Fund pieces and focusing on the hatcheries. You're getting 55 million of ARPA funds. $1 million would be for design. And your estimate is that at that point, you're about probably 30 million short, although we'd know more from design. Right. Does that mean that design and construction and replacement of the hatcheries is a total of about 85 million? And you're about halfway there? That's
what we're predicting right now. It'll be a total of about 85 million. We're still in the process. Last year, we received $1 million to do technology research. The issue at hand is that EPA set our discharge permit, our NEPDES permit, at 12 parts per billion. That's, to my knowledge, that's the lowest that they've ever issued anywhere in the United States. And we're in the process of trying to make sure before we build whether or not if we can meet that type of a discharge. So we're actually doing some we're beginning some pilot studies right now at New Durham to see what kind of technology and what the cost of that technology will be. We may discover that it's going to be too costly to meet those types of a requirement, and that would force us to look at moving a hatchery to a new location. You need to remember these hatcheries, the youngest one is a little over 50 years. The oldest ones are well over 100 years old. When those hatcheries were sited, nobody really thought about discharge. That was never a thought. It was more about, water source. And in the old days, in the early days, was also about gravity because, you just didn't have electricity in some of these rural areas. So, like in New Durham, we've got a wonderful facility with a wonderful water source, and it's completely gravity fed. As I imagine you folks can imagine right now, our hatchery in Milford is well fed, and the electric bill there is climbing rather quickly right now. So it does come out as a balance and a management issues.
If you were to, just to help me sort of understand, a couple of questions. One is how many hatcheries do you have overall? But to dovetail that in, what are you doing with the 55 million? What are you not doing without the 30 million? And just in the back of my mind, and this, I know this is stupid, and I acknowledge that this is probably a dumb question, but you're doing $1 million for design, but you're doing 55 million, which you're presumably using for some construction too.
Correct.
Wouldn't you have done the design first? And it feels to me like the design, which, you know, let's say it gets approved, you won't get it for a year. It feels like that's in the middle.
Yeah, and so what's going on? We have $1 million doing the research to figure out what the technology is going to be. Out of that 55 million, there's money in there to design the 2 hatcheries that we believe will build with that money. This third request will be money to design the 3rd and rebuild of the 4th hatchery. I believe when we're done, we're probably going to have 3 hatcheries, 3 new hatcheries, and 1 rebuilt hatchery. Is what our goal is right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. New Hampshire Veterans Home. Good morning. Thank you.
Morning.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
My name is Kim McKay, and I'm the Commandant at the New Hampshire Veterans Home. I'm pleased to be here to discuss our fiscal year 24-26 capital budget requests. Today, we'll talk a little bit about our strategic plans and then describe the request in detail. The New Hampshire Veterans Home, I'm sorry, let me introduce Matt, sorry.
Hi, Matt Henry, Director of Administrative Services. Good morning.
The New Hampshire Veteran Home was founded in 1889 as a home to care for our aging Civil War veteran population. Today, what we look like is we're a facility that we have a 250-bed capacity. License-wise, we are budgeted for 225. However, due to current limits around staffing, as everyone else in long-term care and healthcare are experiencing, our current census is 123 veterans. With the staff that we have right now, we could probably go to 130, but we would not be able to house more than that safely with quality of care. Unlike other long-term care facilities in the state, we are certified by the Veterans Administration. All other state facilities are CMS certified. The VA certification provides us with a per diem payment, 2 different rates. One is a basic rate, which is a standard rate for all veterans, and one is called a prevailing rate, which is a higher standard of rate based on service-related disabilities. The mission statement of the Veterans Home hasn't changed for decades. It is to provide the best quality of life for veterans with dignity, honor, and respect. The capital budget project request we are presenting this morning will ensure that we can safely care for our veterans and meet this mission. Our FY 24-26 budget invests over $4 million into critical life safety projects, as well invest in our our supply and service infrastructure to bring us into a post-pandemic environment. My strategic priorities include investing into health life safety requirements, maintaining our steady flow of the per diem rate payments, preparedness to bring us into the post-pandemic world, and purchasing needed equipment to grow the census when staffing allows us to do so. We have 6 on the file here, but we have a 7th capital budget request that has come up, and I will let Mr. Henry outline those project requests.
Good morning, Matt Henry, Director of Administrative Services. What I'll do is I'll skip over the slide that says current projects. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. But really, I wanted to talk about 2 kind of buckets. So the first bucket is state fiscal year 24-26 requests. Back in April, we submitted to the business supervisor 6 capital projects that met the commandant's strategic priorities. About a week after, we were high-fiving each other because we were happy that the capital budget was submitted. We were happy with all the requests, and our VA survey occurred. So we had various findings. We were pretty pleased with the survey in general, but one finding that we couldn't wrap our head around was one regarding sprinkler systems in closets. So particularly in our tar south area. The finding was published in May, and we contested the finding, hoping that the VA would come to their senses and use a little bit of reasonableness to the finding. Frankly, we lost, and frankly, the VA was right. So our thesis statement, if you will, was that there's a small room exemption for hospitals that we tried to argue. The VA came back and said, hey, silly, you're not a hospital, you're a nursing home. You are a home, there's combustible materials in closets, thou shalt install sprinkler systems. So the amended project list is on that state fiscal year 24-26 project list proposed. And really, we wanted to shimmy a #1 priority in installing sprinkler systems building wide. So before I go into project by project detail, I just kind of wanted to set the stage on why we're coming to you. And we did notify the governor's office preemptively to give a heads up about that as well. Yep.
I just want to say that the reason why that is now risen to our priority 1 is that we are certified provisionally right now. The VA has given us a provisional certification, which means we will continue to receive our per diem rate payments, but we must be fully certified to continue getting those payments, which is a large portion of our budget. So we have to come into compliance with that requirement. And again, that's why we challenged the requirement. They have said, no, you must sprinkler all of those closets in the entire facility.
So obviously our preference is to not throw out our Tar South modernization project, but we understand that if we had to select one, that is one that could possibly be deferred because it's not a life safety project. So now I'll go in just briefly project by project. So first I'll talk a little bit about the building-wide sprinkler system upgrade. So on the slide, it shows where the sprinkler system should go and where the sprinkler systems are. So the fire code does require that we install these sprinkler systems, and when doing further investigation throughout the building, we realized that our entire building requires sprinkler systems, not just the tar self area that the VA identified. So the next project is site-wide drainage and water safety improvements. I had the privilege of watching yesterday Commissioner Arlinghouse's testimony for the Department of Administrative Services, and I think you referenced 6-bucket leak and 12-bucket leak. So what I would argue, you're gonna wish that you never referenced that, right? But I think the way I would describe this is if you have a 6-bucket leak in that corner of the room, 6-bucket leak on that corner of the room, 6-bucket leak on that corner of the room, and a 6-bucket leak on that corner of the room, you have a 24-bucket leak. So the veterans home has major water issues. We have water every time there's a heavy rainstorm. There's water issues at another part of the building. This capital project really is intended to fix the water problem at a macro level as opposed to a micro level. So this will require some investigative work. This will require some pretty sophisticated design, but we really want to take care of it once and for all. So these two photos show that the photo on the right shows the water protruding from a communication conduit, thankfully not electrical, but the photo on the left shows an electrical generator that the water is flowing directly into. So the next project is an entryway life safety improvements. This one's relatively simple. It's already designed, but here at the veterans home, we have metal roofs in 2/3 of our building, and there's hazardous snow runoff that happens at each entrance. So this is really to construct some entryway protective areas so we don't have to use caution tape like we currently do. The next project is really a phase 2 of a previously approved project for 2018. It had to do with camera systems and electronic security systems. These badges get us entry into the veterans home. We prioritized camera systems in 2018. So we really have a lot more work to do with regard to enhanced security system access. We want to do our Ledoux area. Currently, we have keypads and combination locks as well as physical keys. The next project that as I mentioned, is a candidate for deferment is our Tar South modernization project. You walk through the veterans home and and we're very proud of how the veterans home looks. However, there's one area in Tar South that really, you walk in and it looks like a hospital, and we want to take care of that. The next project is a medical lift installation. This is one phase out of many. We want to incrementally install ceiling lifts throughout the building. Our admissions committee is very concerned with admitting residents, and frankly, they get larger when they're admitted, and they become bariatric after some time. So we want to install 11 lifts per biennium, and this would be phase 1. And the final project is a warehouse and vehicle storage building. Our warehouse is undersized. We essentially want to double the size of our warehouse. The warehouse was originally constructed as an emergency operations building, and the area is overcrowded. We have supplies and vehicles stored all over the building. Some of the photos we show recreational equipment that are stored in boiler rooms. We have vehicles that are stored in maintenance bays, and we really need additional storage space in order to be prepared for the next pandemic when it does come, so we can have not stockpile, but a little bit of surplus supply in PPE as needed. But even that aside, our warehouse is cramped. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions you might have.
Thank you. My question relates to the sprinkler system, and just want to be sure that you weren't in violation of any local or state regulations. This is the mandate to have the sprinklers in the closet is strictly a VA mandate.
So the answer is yes and no. So the yes answer is we were in violation because the code does in fact say that sprinkler systems at nursing homes closets in nursing homes require sprinkler systems. Our fire marshal, having local jurisdiction, interpreted us as a medical facility to be exempt from that under what's known as a small room requirement. The VA disagreed with that. So we are not in danger of being shut down because the VA has no jurisdiction over that, but they have the power of the person. They can withhold per diem payments.
Okay, follow-up to that is, did the VA give you a time frame on when you had to have this in before they cut off the funding?
So they come every April to do their survey, their annual survey. We have a provisional certification into the next survey, which is April. We wrote in our corrective action plan that we would not be able to get this done until the fall of 2023, knowing that we would have to wait for the process to go through. So what they've done is given us a provisional certification. They will come in April. They will find us again. That will be a deficiency. We will then again be on the record for, and we'll have to show the progress as we go. So if this is approved, we will show them that progress, and we'll do that all the way through. We will get another deficiency in April because it would not be complete by April, but there would be the expectation of it being completed by the fall of 2023, or it would affect our per diem rate payments.
Okay, well, with the timing with this money and that it would be coming July 1st, 2024, how does that complicate the issue, or should we look for other methods of funding this?
Good point. Yes.
So I think that was an oversight. We'll have to work with the VA to amend our cap.
Okay, thank you. Right.
I'm sorry. No, I think we're correct. So FY 24 begins a year from now. So I think, no, we're good. I'm sorry. So we are hoping to get first on the priority. I'm looking at DAS. So hopefully we can, if we take the design out of Hyde, we can begin to execute the project till July 1 of next summer. Sorry, I had to talk that through. Thank you.
It's always an issue with fiscal years, right?
Yes.
You're like, which one ends which year and which begins which year? Two things. One is that, first of all, Commandant, welcome to your first capital budget hearing. So you seem to be doing quite well, though. And it's not that shocking to me that your excellent staff would have the title Director of Administrative Services. I suspect that makes it just naturally a good staff. So anyway, building-wide sprinkler system upgrade, why not? It strikes me as being a fairly urgent thing, and you're right, capital budget, you know, a year from now, you might get funding if everything goes, it sounds like you probably will. It would, if I were a betting man. But it feels to me like this is the kind of thing where, because of its quasi-urgent, well, it's urgent rather than emergency nature, that maybe you could approach Gopher about using ARPA funds for. And I'm sure, I don't want to speak for Gopher or ARPA funds, but I think it's something where you might be able to get started 9-10 months earlier than you would otherwise.
So I'm just not sure what the COVID link to, doesn't there have to be a COVID link to Gopher? I'm not sure what
There
that would
doesn't.
be. It doesn't.
Well,
Okay.
why don't we talk?
Sounds good.
Yeah, and I think it's a thing because they're God knows we're doing lots of things that don't have a I don't want to say this federally, but there's not a direct COVID link.
I think if we can have it resolved earlier, the better, because in April, again, that'll show as a deficiency for our facility. And so it puts us at risk. Every single deficiency puts us at risk for losing our per diem rate.
It feels like something we could certainly pitch them on. So
Thank you.
But that was the big thing. So
I just wanted to add one thing in your write-up. You mentioned that you could work on design sooner. Do you have funding available in the current biennium to help offset any of that? I don't know how much the design cost would be, but to help offset some of that before?
We do.
Okay.
On the sprinkler system, do you know how many closets you have offhand that need to be sprinklered?
300 building wide.
And does your estimate of the $300,000 is that for just adding piping and sprinkler heads to the closets?
It's also involving incidental work. Presumably, we'd have to do some ceiling work, hire a contractor in to cut holes in ceilings and things of that nature.
But the estimate doesn't include any rework of the existing sprinkler system?
No.
Would the heads that are in the closets be fed off of the existing sprinkler system, or would there be a new system just for the closets?
My instinct says it would be fed off the existing system, but I would defer to A&E for that.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other questions, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take about a 12-minute break here, and we'll be back at 10 o'clock with the Department of Education.
I know, I'm sorry. I'll take the, is that all?
I'm Sherry Rockford. I'm the Assistant Commissioner with Charlie at Department of Administrative Services. So I have a fun job all day long with him. It is. But I knew Peggy over the years, so congratulations. There is one bucket of our funding that it's not COVID pandemic specific. It's a bucket that has, like, out of the 1.2 billion we got, there's a bucket, lack of a better word, that is, I'll sort of say it's for general government services. So it came from a special formula that, to be honest, is a mess, but putting that aside, it took a year to figure that out. But so it says of the 1.2, there's a max amount states can spend. To be honest, yeah, I call it sort of the
my words, don't repeat it, but the governor's discretionary fund, but it changed, the name had changed over the course of the legislation that was passed. But it's a chunk that's really for like other things that are just general government purposes that, other things that existed and revenue had come in plentiful, you would normally do these things. And so, we haven't tapped into hardly any of it because we want to use all the other buckets first.
Right.
But that is a ball.
So can I just get understand the intent of the fund? So the intent is the state spends money elsewhere because of COVID.
Correct.
They need to reimburse.
Exactly.
state.
That's
Gotcha.
exactly what it's for. Exactly. Yep. Perfect.
So should we just reach out to?
Who's the program manager?
Yep, that's a great question. I can send you the link with the adjustment to the folder. Yes.
We would love to get that sooner.
Nice to meet you. Yeah.
If not ARPA, then, $350 million plus. Yeah, just get it done.
It would be nice if it had finished.
Which, in the governor.
Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning. For the record, Frank Gadelblue, Commissioner of Education.
Tammy Valancourt, CFO for the Department of Education.
So I'd like to begin by discussing our first two projects, which in some sense are linked. And these are two projects that are really centered around ending what I've referred to as the nomadic existence of the Department of Education. And I can go into some of the details of that if that's important for the committee, or is everybody familiar with how we were displaced a couple of times from our present facilities? Yes. Yes, okay. And so the number one project is a project to acquire the Granite State College building on Hall Street in Concord. That is the building that we are presently in and leasing from the University System of New Hampshire. We are occupying 3 of 4 floors in that building. We are also leasing space in Concord for our special education unit as well. If we were to acquire the building, we would take over all of those floors and we would be able to consolidate all of our educational activities into that one building, which would include the special education unit that we are in, third-party lease facilities right now, as well as our adult education and our career and technical education units that are presently in the Walker building. And so this price that we've put on here obviously would be something that would have to go out and get actual appraisals. But this is an amount that we put in here that was agreed to for purposes of the capital budget process by the university system. I'm working with Kathy Provencher. So we feel pretty comfortable that, it's not completely pie in the sky. You'll see that the second item that it goes along with that is if we don't achieve item number 1, then there will be additional costs associated with allowing us to reoccupy the facility that we have. We don't have a complete estimate as to what that would look like because some of the asbestos remediation is ongoing and is even, as we speak, out for proposals to replace the ceilings that are in there. But we've also got a previously approved capital project to replace the bathrooms, which were in significant need of upgrade, as well as some elevator work, because the elevator is antiquated and frequently breaks down, and we end up with people stuck in there, as well as when there are heavy amounts of rain, we generally end up with about 1.5 feet of water in the bottom of the elevator shaft, which make it difficult to work with. So these two projects go together in terms of trying to sustainably locate the Department of Education and avoid, again, the nomadic existence that we have going on right now. And so I'll pause right now before I go to the next project.
Okay. My question is, who currently owns the building? Is it University Systems of New Hampshire?
Correct. The current building is owned by the University System of New Hampshire.
Okay. So it'd be a transfer payment from Department of Education to them.
It would be all in the family, yes.
Okay. And maybe this question is directed better to you, but the building you had to vacate because of the asbestos problems. What's happening, or what has happened to that building?
So
Which was my past neighbor when I was at DRA.
Is that right? Okay. So at present, the flooring asbestos has been mitigated. The ceiling asbestos the asbestos has been taken out, and now the ceilings have to be replaced in there. When they were in the process of working towards that replacement, they had to look at the light fixtures, and they noticed that the wiring is not to code as well. So then I think at present, we're basically trying to figure out what is it going to cost to replace that wiring and then be able to put the ceilings back in. And so that is what's happening there. That would not include the renovation of the attic area that is referenced in this particular capital item, which would allow us the room to be able to put everybody back in there, albeit in a very inefficient kind of configuration, but we could get ourselves back into that facility. And then there would be ongoing projects. We'd have another I think it's about 580,000 of work in the bathrooms, as well as elevator work. So I think what you find is as we begin to accumulate some of these costs, we're, approaching in the several $1 million of work to make the building occupiable, not an efficient facility, but occupiable. And so the question is it better to just have the Granite State building and then have a longer term plan for this particular facility?
Thank you. Representative?
Are you wed on 25 Hall Street? We're currently looking at a large building to lease in Concord with the potential to buy it, which might have room for you.
So,
I'm just going to add, I'm not sure it would have room for them. If we don't do anything else, yes, we could have room for them. On the other hand, I think this is worth saying that so much of the state's infrastructure is, I'm going to use Lonergan as an example, and it really sounds like the commissioner's talking about a comedy of errors, but it's not. It's how these things work. We try to renovate buildings with people in them. Lonergan happens to be one of the 3 or 4 worst buildings, although probably not the worst building, but we don't fix stuff because people are in them. And it's funny, somebody said to me, well, now that it's empty-ish, nobody's working there. Let's gut the whole thing and start over. And I'm like, that's a great idea. We should do that. Do you have any money? And no, neither do I. Okay. And what you ought to do with all of the buildings on campus is, in the early 90s, they did with Spalding. They essentially went back to the brick. And with DRA, look at DRA, and I can say this because Lindsay isn't here, but it's the nicest building in state government, and it, it's unfortunate that just because you happen to work there, you get to work in a lovely building, and if you happen to work at the Department of Education, you work in a dump, and we need to get beyond that. But those buildings, there's so many things in them, and asbestos was the wonder drug of the year, kind of like cocaine in 1910, and it's in everything, and we run into problems because we fix things. The reason the asbestos came out is somebody fixed something, and it wasn't us, by the way, because we know where the asbestos is, so we wouldn't have done that, my department. But somebody fixed something, and they're like, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know you couldn't drill through the walls. But I work in a building today where Sherry's office, every wall says, do not penetrate, which is lovely as a decorative item.
So more specifically to your question, we're not wed to that particular place, but we're just wed to an office building that's conducive to the work that we're trying to do.
But it's a good spot and would be a good deal. And we're unlikely to find 50,000 square feet of office space in Concord in good shape at that price anytime in the near future.
It is convenient because it is right off the highway. We have about 7,000 unique visitors every year that come to the department for various programming. It is set up with, 2 classrooms and another kind of learning space that allow us to facilitate trainings, oftentimes that we hold for educators, as well as allowing some of our educator associations to use some of those spaces. We are able to host the State Board of Education meetings there. And so in that sense, it has worked well for us.
Okay. Commissioner?
Something that doesn't always get considered is that nomadic existence is expensive on the DOIT side as well. There's a lot of opportunity cost went into moving Frank and team around during the last year or so. So something to think about.
So the next projects that I want to present to you are 2 of our CTE builds. And you have a handout that kind of lays out where all of our CTE centers are, as well the renovation schedule so that you can see historically where we have done some of those renovations. The present facilities that are up right now are the Sugar River Valley, which is in Newport, as well as the Winnisquam Ag Program in Tilton. Sugar River Valley is the first one for around a little over $11 million. That has already received the community's support, so they've already had a vote on it, and so they are prepared and ready to move forward with that particular program. Winnisquam is moving forward, but has not yet been approved locally by their community, but they will be working towards that.
Commissioner, is this funding is at the 75%? I realize the law says between 50 and 75, but I'm assuming that this is at the 75% level.
I believe it is, but let me turn around and confirm. Yes. Which actually works out well to make sure that local communities have skin in the game in terms of making sure that the projects are conducted well. And then our last project on our list is our pre-engineering, $300,000, which we use in our education programming for Project Lead the Way, is the principal deployment of that, which is a STEM-based engineering program that we use in the schools, and this acquires the equipment for those programs on an ongoing basis.
Okay, thank you. Open up for any questions?
Can I ask a question about the CTE funding? I like the renovation schedule chart. I hadn't seen that before, and it's kind of neat because it explains the sort of vision of what's been going on. It's a dumb question. There's nothing in 22-23. Why did we skip that?
So as we approach the end of the list, really what we're focused on is communities that are ready to build, right? So the community itself has to bring the project to us. They might be in the queue, and if somebody says we're not ready in the queue, then we just accelerate the next person in that queue forward. And so at that particular time, there were not projects in there, as well as I think for that period of time, you had the Hudson CTE Center that if you recall, this is one of those projects that we had it spanned biennium. We did part in one biennium and part in the second biennium. That's the Wilbur H. Palmer Center in Hudson. So it says 21-22, but in fact, a lot of that took place after that. About 25% of the project rolled over into the second year. One of the things that's interesting is the way that this works is, you had the original build schedule, like starting back in 1974. And then the way that we have renovated these centers historically, starting back in the 2003 timeframe, is really you just got back in line. We are approaching the end of this list, and I'm not really sure that just the elapsement of time is the right sequencing for when to invest the next thing. Really, what we need to be looking at is a more investment-oriented approach. That basically says we're investing in the kind of programming that our students need. And so we would look at programming in the individual centers and invest in the programming that makes sure that our students are trained in the skills that they need. We do that when they come up in the queue, like we're making sure we don't invest in programming, that doesn't happen anymore. Some examples of that is, we're not interested in horticulture programs anymore. We will do plant science, some of these large greenhouse operations, but it's a whole different type of pedagogy that's taking place. As an example, marketing programs, which generally in the past looked a lot like retail stores. Those are not programs that we tend to support because marketing today is big data and Amazon and trying to modernize the education so that the students coming out have skills for the 21st century.
And so this chart here on the renovation schedule, that's all the CTE centers.
Correct.
And I just want to say this because it's historically there are a lot of people who go, the government can't commit to a 24-year plan on anything, and be trusted, right? And we did, yes. And it's kind of a neat thing to look at.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up, I'd like to invite the Lottery Commission.
Good morning, Jim Doris, CFO for the New Hampshire Lottery Commission.
Morning.
Morning. So you'll forgive me, we haven't done a capital plan before, so I haven't done this, so bear with me. We have a project that comes in just under $800,000. It's made up of three main areas. First area being quite vital is a replacement of our generator system. The lottery is, excuse me, we're dependent on generator in case of power outages or anything, obviously, to keep our systems going. But it's not just for in the case of running the local lottery, it's also running the games included in Muscle and Tri-State games, which are nationwide, your Powerball, Mega Millions. And if we're unable to run our processes at night, that literally halts the whole program for the entire country. So if our generator's over 30 years right now, it's not much smaller than this room. It's the parts are getting very difficult to get and replace because it's obsolete in many cases. Second part of the project is a roof. We purchased our building a few years ago, as I'm sure all of you know. We knew that there was going to be a roof issue at that time because engineering study was done in 2017. We are experiencing leak in the roof. Along with that would be replacement of the HVAC units as they are also reaching that life cycle. And the last area would be the server room. Our server room right now has a sprinkler system in it, water sprinkler system. Again, if something does happen and the issue goes off and those sprinklers go off, our servers are obviously going to be toast. So the idea would be to reconfigure the server room to include a non-water system. I can't remember the name of it right now. I apologize. And to also reconfigure in the same time some office space in that reconfiguration to add more space. We've added, as you all know, Keno, sports betting, HHR now, all these different gaming systems, increasing our staff greatly. A lot of these things came on after we bought the building, and we are running short on space. We've already rented an additional space over on off Airport Road, and we've outgrown that space already. It's to the maximum, so we are going to be looking to just not add on to the building at this point, but just reconfigure to get some more cubicle space at the same time. And that covers our three main areas.
Okay. Question for you is how long does, and I know it's an estimate, does your generator have? Is a generator good for another year?
I certainly hope so. It's one of those things. They're Mickey Mousing some repairs at times when they have to be able to come in and do service on it. Like I said, it is very old. It's so tough to say because things were built differently, and it could last another 10 years because it was well built at the time. But at the same time, it could last another year. It's just hard to call.
And what's the cost of the generator?
Fortunately, that didn't get broken out completely, but I do have an electrical number of $113,000 for the entire project. So I would assume the generator is probably coming in from 18 to 100,000 somewhere in there.
Okay.
Just, you're doing quite well for your first capital budget. How much space are you renting now?
It's about 1,800 square feet.
1,800 square feet, but based on what's going on and you guys are kind of booming in a nice way, and for those of us who spend the money that you raise, we thank you. Probably going to go up in the short term. I mean, 1,800 is not enough. You're going to need 5 or 10.
No, we have 15 people in there now, and you take my word for it, they are...
In 1,800 square feet?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah, and along with a little kitchenette and the nursery room and all those different things that are required in there. So it's a very tight cubicle space.
Hopefully they're friendly to each other. That's a lot of people.
So
in
far,
all the
so
space.
good.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other representative?
Oh, thank you. If you had been blessed with taking care of marijuana, did you make any preliminary estimate of what it was going to take you facility-wise to handle that?
That would be liquor.
That was.
Lottery. I'm the other L.
Oh, I thought you were going to get it. Okay, thank you.
And we
Thanks.
don't want that.
Not seeing any other questions. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. Again, we're going to take a 10-minute break and be back at 10:30 with Military and Veterans Affairs. I'd ask people to take their seats. They're about ready to resume. Okay, it's 10:30 and we have the Military and Veterans Affairs. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Gary, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Major General David Michaelitis, the Adjutant General for the New Hampshire National Guard. And for any technical questions, I have here with me today Major Paige Kamal. She leads our Construction Facilities Management Office. So you look at the Military Affairs and Veteran Services, you should have 2 sheets, hopefully. First sheet should have 6 priorities. That addresses our military affairs portfolio. And when you go down our priorities, I'd just like to focus on the top 5. The first 2 we can sort of clump together or group together. Congress has appropriated us federal dollars in the President's Future Years Defense Plan for military construction projects. So you look at our top 2 priorities in Nashua and Plymouth. Those are already congressionally appropriated federal dollars. We're here seeking the state match in this capital budget process to have the state match for 75-25 federal to state cost share. The 2 top priorities for construction, military construction, a 5,000 square foot addition in Nashua, and about a 25 to 30,000 new armory in the town of Plymouth. When you go down to priority number 3, where it says armory, boiler, and roof replacement, each of our buildings has a different federal state cost share. You know, some buildings are 100% fairly reimbursed, some are 75-25, some are 50-50, and some are 100% state general funded. It's all of a function of the sort of the purpose or the function that that unit does. So for example, our aviation facility and our maintenance facilities are 100% federally reimbursed. Certain buildings in Concord, Pembroke have a 75-25 federal state cost share. This is just get after routine maintenance for boiler replacement and roof replacement. And that's why it's a 75-25 cost share. So we don't get the state general funds. We cannot replace aging roofs on 30-year-old roofs on aging buildings. Priority number 4 is land purchase in Manchester. So a strategic initiative priority for the state of New Hampshire is for us to relocate from our existing Manchester Armory. The Manchester Armory is approximately 8 acres of land on North Elm Street. It's a 100,000 square foot building. For the last decade or 2, I've been involved with different conversations of trying to relocate the Manchester Armory. It all starts with land. In the absence of land, which is a state responsibility, we cannot move the Manchester Armory or relocate to another location. So based upon today's sort of current sort of commercial climate for real estate, we're estimating approximately $5 million to buy approximately 10 to 15 acres of land. When you go to your specific sheet, there's a typo. It says 5 acres. It should say 15. Priority number 5 is Nashua hazardous material replacement, remediation. At our Nashua Armory, where we're doing that 5,000 square foot addition, we know for a fact that in the back of the motor pool, there's former tannery waste that's been capped. So we have to sort of take a relook at the sort of environmental issues at our Nashua parcel to determine if it'll have an impact on where we put this addition and that future, and if we do a future build out there. So those are our top 5 priorities from the military affairs portfolio. If you skip through a couple of your pages, you'll see another page called Veteran Services, where there's 2 projects, both 100% federally reimbursed, and they both have to deal with the expansion of the state veteran cemetery in Boscawen. One is for niches and one is for in-ground cremations. And those are about $2.5 and $3.5 million respectively. Subject to your questions, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. The Armory in Manchester, if you could just briefly explain why you need a new facility, and then what are the plans to happen with the current facility that you have once this new project is completed?
So right now, the Manchester Armory sits on land owned by the Ambuscade Industries. So when we vacate that land, the building and the land goes to the Ambuscade Industries due to its reversionary clause, because they give us the land back in the 1930s to build this armory. That's the first parcel. The armory is over 80 years old. Although it meets our current needs, it's not ideally situated for our future mission sets. So currently the unit in there is called our Field Artillery Brigade headquarters. They're currently in the Middle East. They deploy every 4 to 5 years. So it's their 4th deployment in 20 years. And it's a technologically advanced artillery unit that when they deploy overseas, they don't have the internet, sort of the backbone to currently operate in that facility with some of the networks of which they have. You know, we keep putting in minor routine repairs to try to sort of bring it up to both code and to allow them to perform their federal mission, but it's always been a challenge. So if we can find more advantageous land, the first step for us is buying the land and then sort of working with Congress to get the appropriation for a military construction project. You know, the challenge has always been twofold. One is the cost to buy land. We worked with Ambuscade Industries in the city of Manchester to look at land in the past, and it's always been problematic in a sense that it's either wetlands, waterworks land, just not conducive for interstate access, utilities, and sort of visibility for the public to see us. So that's always been the challenge for us.
Does it have to be in Manchester, or what's the reasoning for keeping it in Manchester?
You know, generally speaking, we would like to be within a 15-mile radius of Manchester. And I think the reason why is this simple: COVID, right? So, you know, everyone wants us to move into some other location or some other town. Well, we just realized for the past 2 years of recovery response that those 17 armories that we had throughout the state, we use them. And so the closer proximity that we have to the city of Manchester to support them in a time of need, I think is advantageous both to the Guard and obviously to the city as well.
Okay. So it's mission compatible that.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I don't see any other questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. And again, for those of you who just arrived, the way this is scheduled, we can't call you before your scheduled time. And so the next one is Department of Transportation at 10:45. So we will recess for another 8 minutes until 10:45. Thank you. Okay, I think we're ready to begin. Department of Transportation. Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning to the members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to present the Department of Transportation's capital budget priorities. With me today are Marie Mullen, our Director of Finance, who'll be presenting. And then should you have questions, we also have our Deputy Commissioner, Andre Briere, as well as our Director of Aeronautics, Rail and Transit, Patrick Herlihy. And I'll just add, it's Patrick's last capital budget presentation. He'll be retiring next week. So all the difficult questions we're going to field to Patrick today, just to test him one last time. So again, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. As many agencies have testified, we had several capital budget requests that we were contemplating putting forward. And today we're really going to focus on our highest priority needs. We at the Department of Transportation are organized into 5 divisions: finance, administration, project development, operations, and aeronautics, rail, and transit. Those are our 5 divisions. And our capital budget requests are associated with 2 divisions, the Division of Operations and then the Division of Aeronautics, Rail, and Transit. And we are proud to partner with all of the transportation agencies in the state. And so today we'll begin with our general fund requests, and then we'll talk about our highway fund requests. And I'll just note, on the general fund side, our 2 priority items are actually to secure match to federal programs to support both our airports and our transit agencies that we work with. The only requests that we're putting forward that would directly impact the Department of Transportation are highway funded requests that are associated with the Division of Operations. So with that, I'll turn it over.
Is related to the aeronautics program. So these are FAA, federal FAA funds, and it's the Airport Improvement Program. The department's requesting $1.2 million, which would leverage nearly $70 million of federal funds. It's anticipated that this request includes 40 projects for 12 public use airports. And it's also anticipated that there'll be federal funding for airport infrastructure, airport terminals, and air traffic control tower projects funded by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which require less of a match with a 0 to 5% match. The AIP program generally provides 90% federal funds with 5% state match and 5% match from the local airports. So on page 3 of the presentation that we have here, we have a brief listing of the typical types of projects that go through the AIP program, whether it's taxiway, runway, rehabilitation, etc. And then on page 4, we have a listing of the airports from around the state, the projected capital projects through the airport master plan that these airports will be qualifying for, with a listing of the federal funds and then the state match requirement for those airports. And then going to page 5, we have some examples of some of the projects and pictures of the various terminals and some of the airports and the projects that will be undertaken with these funds. Our second request is for transit funds. So these are Federal Transit Administration federal funds, and we're asking for $570,000 for the transit bus replacement program, which will leverage $6.3 million in federal funds. This program provides matching funds for the acquisition of approximately 36 vehicles for nonprofit agencies that provide transportation for seniors and individuals with disabilities. And also 18 bus shelters for local public transit systems. Public transportation provides access to jobs and critical services for New Hampshire residents. This program, the federal program, requires the match to be, what we have is we have about half of the match is provided by the state and half is provided by the local transit agency. That match can be either 80-20, so 80% federal funds, 20% match where 10% comes from the state and 10% from the local, or we have a program that's 85% federal where 7.5% comes from the state and 7.5% local. And if you go to page 10 in the presentation, we have a listing there of the requests for vehicles and bus shelters from the various agencies around the state with the required match for both the state and the locals. on page 11, we start with some pictures, and these are typically, these are many of the transit vehicles that will be replaced with some of the condition and corrosion that has occurred on those. So we provided some examples of the vehicles that would be replaced with these federal funds with utilizing the state match. And then I just open up for any questions on our general funded requests.
All right, my question is on the purchasing of buses. What's the useful life these days of a bus, say an electric bus?
An electric bus?
Yeah, is that?
They're usually either diesel.
So yes, as Director Hurley was sharing, we have not used federal funds to acquire any electric buses yet. We're in the process of supporting some of our transit agencies in acquiring electric fleet for the first time. And Advanced Transit, we had an item actually was just approved by Governor and Council, and Advanced Transit will be the first agency to have a fully electric bus.
Okay.
The vehicles that we're replacing primarily are diesel vehicles. It really depends on the mileage, but approximately fleet lasts about 10 years before we replace it. If a bus is heavily utilized and of course is problematic, they'll seek to replace it early based on the mileage rather than the age.
Okay. Better way to ask the question is there any difference in longevity from an electric vehicle, specifically a bus, to one that runs on diesel?
Yeah, again, there's not a lot of data yet because this is a newer industry. However, I will say that the operating expenses are significantly lower with an electric vehicle over a traditional diesel bus. The reason being there's less components and parts that need to be serviced regularly. And so that brings down the cost significantly. However, the initial purchase price is higher currently. The electric buses are significantly more of an upfront investment. The studies have shown that the break-even point is around 3.5 years right now when you look at the life cycle costs and the cheaper cost of operating an electric vehicle compared to a traditional diesel transit fleet.
Okay, thank you. Representative?
You're not bringing anything forward for state-owned rail?
In our original agency request, we did have a couple of items. Certainly if there's general fund surplus opportunities or an opportunity to put forward additional requests, we would advocate for investment in our active rail lines, first and foremost. We have a number of culvert replacement projects, bridge projects, as well as tie projects that we would really like to move forward in the next biennium. But we'll have to wait and see what money might be available. These two items that you have before you today really are the highest need because we're trying to access those federal funds and make sure that the state can put those dollars to good use.
I have to ask about an airport question because I can't let Patrick get away without us asking about airports. I wasn't going to until you announced that he was retiring. I'm curious about airports, and a lot of it is because I drive by the Concord Airport too often when I can go up to DOP and I go right by the Concord Airport, and I always look at it and go, that building has some potential, but all of it unrealized. We have, I think I read from this, we have 8 federally funded airports, and to what extent is that, pardon me? 12, thank you. Many of those are municipally owned. And to what extent, how do we determine what's a state responsibility, what's a town responsibility? And in addition to that, do we think the health of the airports is, are airports closing, expanding? We think the airports are all okay.
Have to use the microphone. And thank you for asking Director Hurley that question.
See, this is what I'm trying to do, get him to come up.
No, but my answer expires in 6 days, so.
That's okay.
I'd say most of the airports that we're dealing with here in this budget request are general aviation airports, similar to Concord. They are all still open to the public. they exist. They have planes based there. So I would say that it's pretty much been status quo since around 2008.
And, what happened in 2008? Something
The-
closed
the-
or something
the
opened?
recession.
Okay. Did things close in 2008?
They didn't close, but a lot of planes left the area, or especially like businesses that use corporate aviation, kind of scaled back on that. But now they've been coming back to that. So the planes have increased over the last few years, but again, it's been a modest increase.
Okay. And it, to some extent, with some of the infrastructure improvements, I mean, would you anticipate that expanding? I mean, I doubt we're ever going to have another airport because,
Right.
the land issue and all that, if nothing else, but some could thrive. I mean, I
yes.
look at it and say,
Go to Nashua. Look at that airport. That thrives. That's a general aviation airport that thrives.
okay.
Yeah.
That was my question, yes.
Yeah, Nashua's that way. Skyhaven does a good business down there. Concord does. You go on during graduations or during when they have the NASCAR races, and the airport's crucial at that point in time.
Great. Thank you for your answer and thank you for your service and congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you very much.
Since this is my first and last time to get to ask you a question,
Yeah.
the airline industry as a whole is undergoing some strenuous times right now. I mean, from inability to find pilots to fly their planes to fuel prices, which are going through the roof. Are you anticipating any sort of contraction in the significant contraction in the airline industry? And if so, how will that impact, mainly the airport in Manchester?
Right. I really don't have any information on that. We're pretty much the construction group, so we're the ones that go in and make sure that the airport is safe and that things are being done to FAA standards. The market itself is more of an airport and a airline decision-making process, so we're not really involved in that.
Okay.
The one thing I would add is that, while the average person thinks of commercial air travel when they think about airports, our airports have a significant impact on our economy, not just because they move people, but because of the goods that are transported through the airports. And so even when we've seen a contraction in recreational and vacation travel, we've still seen, especially during the pandemic, the critical role that our airports play in our overall transportation system. And there's been a lot of expansion when it comes to the commercial operations at these airports across the state.
Yeah, Manchester's in the process of building a new cargo facility.
Great. Thank you.
Good morning. So my question is also on the aviation side, but more on the funding. In some of the summary pages, it looked like the general fund share was around 7 million that was requested, and 63 million was going to be the federal match. And I'm assuming it might be a 10%, but it looks like in your description that based on the average of like 2.5, 5, or 10%, it's closer to 1.2. So I was just sort of trying to reconcile what the general fund share might be closer at.
There's a number of different federal programs that have different participation requirements. So the typical programs are 90% federal with a 5% local match and 5% state match.
Okay.
However, in the bipartisan infrastructure law, there was some funding provided for airports, and the matching requirements are different. And so we have tried to anticipate, based on the airport master plans, what projects each airport will undertake, and based on eligibility, what the mix of funds will be. And that's how we came up with the state match requirement.
So 1.2.
Yes.
So Sherry, if you, Assistant Commissioner Sherry, if you go to page 4, there's a detailed breakdown there. So in the upper box, it shows that what the commissioner was just talking about with that 90-10 share, and so that we're showing this 5% state share, so that comes out to about 2.7 million. We're only asking for 1.2, and then that lower box identifies where that difference is. So previously, in previous bienniums, we've requested matching funds, and we have some excess available. So you can see there's about 1.5 million reduction in that below box. So we're reducing our request down to the 1.2 million for what we already have available from prior biennium approvals.
And that's because in 2020 and 2021, the COVID relief funding, projects were allowed to use 100% federal funding. We already had the state match authority, but so we didn't use it, so we're netting it out of this request.
Oh, and for the folks online, so in previous bienniums, we had requested the match, but when the COVID relief funds came, they provided 100% of the federal funds, and we didn't require a state match, so we have excess state match for the folks at home who didn't hear the response.
Provided we get match.
True.
Thank you.
Okay, if no further questions, we'll go on to the highway fund. So our first request for the highway fund is for a little over $2 million for construction of our salt and sand sheds. Currently, in many of the locations, we cannot store a season's worth of salt, and the sheds are reaching the end of their useful life. And environmental regulations require that all salt be stored undercover. So if you turn to page 14, we have a listing of our oldest salt sheds and those that we would anticipate replacing. And so what we do is with this request, we'll replace as many of these salt sheds as we can with the funds that allow. And so you can see many of these sheds here are near 40 years old, or some are over 40 years old. And some of the pictures starting on page 15, you can see the condition of these sheds, the deterioration, the holes in the siding, and especially they were built so long ago that many of the vehicles that we have can't fit inside of these sheds to move the salt efficiently. So we're looking to replace some of these oldest sheds with this funding, and that is our top priority request. Our second request is related to underground fuel tanks. In the last biennium, we were not approved. Generally, we try to get money every biennium so that we can, replace these tanks as needed during their replacement life cycle. But in the last biennium, we did not receive funds for this, so we've had to defer tank replacements for the last couple of years. Currently, we have about 40 sites that have underground storage tanks that are in excess of 25 years old or nearing their life expectancy. And so the potential for environmental damage, compliance, and extensive repairs increases considerably as these underground storage tanks are aging. We're requesting approximately $2 million for that. And if you go to page 20 in the book, we've listed some of our oldest fuel tanks. And with this $2 million, we would reconstruct as many of these fuel tanks as would allow with those funds. You can see that many of these are significantly beyond the estimated useful life of the tanks at over 34, 35 years old. And that's what we would request these funds for. Our last priority request today is for $5 million for the improvement of crew quarters at our patrol sheds statewide. The improvements for these crew rest areas are necessary due to the winter activities, the 24/7 nature during storms, and the required safety breaks that are required. We also need to comply with current building codes and safety fire marshal findings that we've had previously. So the $5 million would provide improvements to as many of the nearly 90 DOT patrol sheds statewide. And on page 24 of our presentation, we've included some pictures there as to examples of the crew quarters that we currently have, and some of the safety issues potentially. The first picture on page 24, you can see the crew quarters are right next to abutting the heating system, and probably not good safety protocol to have our employees sleeping and resting in those areas during snowstorms. So that's our final request on that we're presenting on the highway fund, and open it up to any questions.
What's the age of the salt sheds now, especially these pictures that you've sent around?
On page 14, we have a list of the locations under item number 3 that we would intend
Oh, there
to
we go.
address with these funds. And you'll see,
I see the, okay, I see the ages
they
here.
range in age from 19 to 44 years.
And I mean, with some of these facilities, it's not just the age of them, but salt has obviously significant
corroding
damage.
event,
So when
yeah.
you have wooden structures and things, salt can deteriorate those very quickly as compared to a normal building.
The other challenge is, we try to take advantage of competitive pricing and acquire a full year's worth of salt and sort of hedge against inflation when costs are increasing. And currently, we don't have sufficient space to store a full year's worth of salt. Some of our sheds are still on the smaller side. So as we replace the older infrastructure, we're making sure that we size it appropriately so that we can not only have efficient operations, as Marie was saying, with more space to let the equipment operate within the shed, but then also to make sure that we have the capacity to store the material that we need.
Okay. How many sheds do you have statewide?
There's around 90 locations.
And so I take it, it's you build them periodically and,
Yeah, this is a recurring capital budget request. Each biennium, we're asking for the funds to replace a certain number so we can gradually address all of the deficient locations.
okay, thank you.
Of the 40 sites that have fuel tanks, how many tanks does that comprise? Is it more than just 40 tanks?
Yeah, some of the tanks are combined sites for both diesel and unleaded, so there's numerous tanks at each location.
And are there any, building fuel tanks on those sites that need to be replaced as well?
I don't believe this item addresses any fuel tanks specifically for the gas storage, but we certainly have other needs when it comes to replacing the tanks associated with our facilities themselves.
Thank you.
How many, how many, it says you have 40 fuel sites that have underground storage tanks. Silly question, but do you have any that don't, where the tank isn't underground? Is 40 is the fuel distribution network 40 sites?
No, we have 40 sites that are 25 years of age or older. And so the request is associated with addressing the tanks
Oh.
at those locations. Again, this is a recurring capital budget
Sure.
request because we try to, each biennium, address a certain number of tanks. I just want to reassure you that we are in compliance with all environmental standards, but of course the risks when you have older equipment increase significantly. As Marie shared, we did not receive funding through the last capital budget for fuel sites. And so that's why we really have this as a high priority need in this cycle, because we don't want to go 4 years without addressing some of these locations.
So you have 40 sites that are over 25 years old. How many sites total? Ballpark.
I think we have, again, around 90 locations. Not every shed has fuel. However, we have locations that are not at a shed. For example, here in Concord, there's one on Hazen Drive that is not one of our locations.
But they're generally co-located with other, I know this is off subject, they're generally co-located with other facilities?
Yes, to aid with our operations, it makes sense to have fuel sites, both where the trucks operate, but then also the staff that are responsible for those facilities are there to provide day-to-day oversight of the fuel sites.
Thanks.
Representative.
Commissioner, looking at another agency's request, do you talk with safety about what they are proposing to use highway funds in the next capital budget?
So in the early phase of the budget process, each agency develops their own list of needs. Certainly as we move into the later phases, we'll be collaborating with safety. One of the things that was done during the last budget was an assessment of how much borrowing could be sustained with the highway fund and its current revenues. And so that's the one thing to stress is, while generally, we've talked about a general fund capital budget of around 125 million, we'll have to collaborate with safety to understand what the appropriate amount of borrowing would be based on general fund revenue projections.
Not seeing any other questions. Thank you very much. Greatly appreciate it. And congratulations and good luck on your retirement. Okay. Again, we have another built-in break into the schedule, and we will be back at 6-minute recess, and we'll be back at 11:15 with the judicial branch. Okay, it's 11:15. I request that people take their seats. And I would like to invite up representatives of the judicial branch for their presentation. Hello. Yep. Good morning. Yeah. Before we begin, I've been waiting to do this for 2 days, and that is, I dare correct the commissioner to my right here, and that he said repeatedly that the DRA is the nicest building in state government. And having worked at the DRA, it is a beautiful building. It's number 2 on my list. And I've talked to you about before. The Supreme Court is the nicest building in state government.
I withdraw my earlier statement.
And no one would know it's 50 years old, except we have our historic designation plaque now. So I'm Justice Hans Marconi. I'm here to support Diane Martin, our executive director, and she will take it away.
Okay. Please begin. Thank you.
Hi, Diane Martin, Director of the Administrative Office of the Courts. I like to think that where we are located right now is also very nice at 1 Granite Place. Hi, Senator. Okay, so we only have one capital budget request for this biennium. It is fairly straightforward. It builds off of work that Justice Hans Marconi started in the last biennium to digitize some of the old book collection that is housed in the basement of the Supreme Court right now without any real protection. And sort of in conjunction with this, we are also working on creating an archive room in the basement where some of these older records and books can be placed. But the safest thing to do, obviously, is to digitize them and to make them available electronically to people so that they can access them without actually seeing or touching them, so we can preserve them. But I'm going to turn it over to Justice Hans Marconi to really speak to the merits of the project.
You can imagine my surprise when I joined the court and was assigned to be the library judge. So housed in the Supreme Court building is the King Law Library. It is, I'll call it administratively connected with the court. It is the state's only public law library. It is the library of record. It is the only place that the public can go in and get legal resources. And it's housed in our building. And our librarian works with other public libraries to make sure those resources are accessible throughout the state. But the universities, the federal court, those law libraries have over the years been, I'll say privatized, but there is no public access. So in my job as library judge, I discovered, Mary Searles, our librarian, of course, knew they were there. We have case books in the basement on shelves. And I gave a presentation right before COVID to the Joint Legislative Historical Committee on this fact that we have these old case books that range from 1849 to 1977. 1977, not so old. 1849, very old. And beyond that, we have some rare books and some documents, docket books that precede that. In these case books, because what happened were the judges on the Supreme Court rode circuit and they heard cases. And then at the end of the case, all the documents, whether there were sheriff's notices, deeds, the court's notes, the pleadings of the parties were put together, and then cases were stacked up, and when it got to a critical mass, they stitched them into books. So in these books are archival documents, old paper, ink, Charles Doe writings, the Mary Baker Eddy cases, the original Mary Baker Eddy trust cases, which in recent decades, because the litigation's been ongoing for so long, or it starts anew, people do come to research those old materials. We also have the Harry Hand case, which is a law school favorite. It is a well-known tort case involving medical malpractice where a doctor grafted skin that grew hair onto a palm injury, and so the gent ended up with a hairy hand and sued. So these are historical, they're also valuable research documents. This project in 2018, and you have in your materials, the Northeast Document Conservation Center took a look at them, put together a proposal, $2 million to digitize and preserve all those papers. Now, obviously, my focus is the oldest, and so they broke the project into 3 parts to deal with the oldest, most fragile documents first, and then as we go through time to preserve the later documents, we will then have a gap between 77 and today when things have moved to a digital process, but that's beyond my focus at the moment. So what we did last year, we had a small appropriation, $50,000. We have started on processing the first old case books, so we'll have something to show you shortly, which they disbind, they take the documents, they preserve them in acid-free paper, they go on shelves, and then the electronic version is available for research purposes. And if someone needs to come in to get to the actual artifact, we can produce that in a more rare book fashion. So right now, these things are on a shelf in the basement. Thank goodness. We have a nice building. It hasn't leaked. But we really need to do something to better preserve these documents for the state, because they aren't just court documents, they're state artifacts. Originally, the library was intended to have a rare book room. That never happened when the building was built. It's now a conference room. So we have plans in the works, not part of this project, to identify space to have climate controlled so that when we get these documents preserved, we have a place to store them long term. So this is just the preservation digitization piece of it. And so ultimately it will be a multi-year process. And the final thing Mary, our librarian, told me is with state funding, she will have the ability to seek some additional funding from places like the Library of Congress and some federal grants that are geared toward preserving old documents. So this is a start, and it is frankly long overdue, and I'm happy to take questions.
Okay. You said 2 million was the total figure to get all the digitizing
633 bound documents is 2 million.
Thank you.
I just want to say, first of all, I want to thank the Supreme Court for sending my favorite justice, and I'm sorry the chief isn't here to hear me say that.
We'll be sure to tell him.
Thank you. I would appreciate that. I would like that. I had the privilege of working with Justice Marconi on a tour she took me in the basement and showed me the books. And it was appalling, right? It was wonderful and appalling at the same time. And I think this is a wonderful request. And I think there's a microwave in the same room, right?
The books are on shelves outside of the shredding closet. So when
it's important
all
not to
our
get
documents
confused.
go down and get shredded, the dust from the documents goes, and I'm told by Northeast Document Center that that's a really bad thing. So yes.
So I think I think it's great that we're gonna fix up space probably in the basement to have a room. Will some of the most interesting documents eventually be on display somewhere?
That's what so we have the rare book room. We hope also to have a space for researchers to work with the materials, but then we also want to have display space in the upper floors of the library so that the public, we get student groups in, we get the public in, of course, using the library. And so a lot of these things, we have a great place to showcase some of the important stuff that we have. So, yes.
Good. You were telling me right before we came on air, so to speak, about the notion of many of the court documents are sort of scattered about.
Yes. This is nicely, these books are in one place, but I have also learned through working with the Supreme Court Society, talking to the state archivists, talking to clerks in our superior courts, there are documents, including case documents, Supreme Court documents, that are just scattered about. And so, big picture, this is a start, and we'd love to proceed with preserving this sort of legal history of the state. And so the Supreme Court Society has worked on a project to identify important cases in the law so that we can at least start in a prioritized way to draw those in as well.
Thank you.
I know that repeated use and environment are the antithesis of good book preservation.
Yes.
Do you have any estimate on how much material, and this is probably maybe just a guess at this point, you've lost due to those conditions?
So far, and I think it's a hat tip to whoever built our building, we haven't lost anything. Some of the pages in some of the older books, when Mary gets them out with the white gloves, they're fragile. But we haven't had any of the total books, disintegrate, and we haven't had any of the old books or old documents disintegrate so far. So it is really a testament to the building, and also the time is right to start this project.
Yeah, thank you. Representative?
You did mention that it would cost about $2 million to do all of them. If you got the entire $2 million, would you be able to spend it all in one biennium, or is the plan that we started on 2 years ago the way to go? Do it right over a period as we go forward.
I am sure that Northeast Document Conservation Center would ramp up and do it all in one biennium. Again, I am most concerned with the oldest first. So I think a staged proposal, and you were involved, we talked about this 2 years ago, and I'm sure this price from 2018 might have gone up. But I think staging it makes sense. Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are reaching the end. Pease Development Authority is next up. I'd like to invite you to come up for your presentation.
Let me just check in the hall, Mr. Chairman. Any direct executive director may be out here.
Nice phrase, antithesis.
Each one digitized. The archives is set up to preserve those things, those types of, especially the older.
Right, yeah, that's.
And you can't go over there.
Good morning.
Morning. Hi. Oops, excuse me. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee and staff. I'm Gino Marconi. I'm the director at the New Hampshire Port Authority, which is a division of the Pease Development Authority. With me is the Pease Executive Director, Paul Breen, and also with us is Susie Anzalone, who is our Finance Director. So what you have before you today is a couple of requests, one of which we're going to withdraw from the capital budget because we got some funding through the ARPA program. But the first one you have is a small dredging project. When New Hampshire DOT built the Sarah Mildred Long Bridge, we lost part of our facility down there, and New Hampshire DOT and Federal Highway agreed to give us a functional replacement to make us whole again. And part of that project is dredging. And it's a big piece of dredge in where the new facility is going to be added onto. But we also need to do a small dredge alongside the face of the pier. I call it a maintenance dredge. The Army Corps of Engineers said, no, it's a separate project. But it would be advantageous for us to do that maintenance dredge at the same time that the functional replacement project is. So that's what this first request you have here for $621,000. It's based on current costs for dredge material. It's a really small project. It's about 1,300 cubic yards, but we want to do that at the same time that the functional replacement project is being done, and that whole project's $34 million. So that's our request for that one, sir. And then the second project you have in there is funds to do decking and cross bracing on the Portsmouth Commercial Fish Pier. We'd like to withdraw that one because, as I said last week, Governor and Council and the Fiscal Committee approved that funding with ARPA monies. And then the third one is an important project. It's out a little bit further than the other ones. I'll give you a little history. A couple of years ago, the seawall at the Portsmouth Fish Pier failed, and the legislature appropriated $3.25 million to do that project. That project's been completed. But the building that's there was built in 1977, 78, and it's a wood building. And in that environment, the building's old, it's falling apart, it really needs to be replaced. And that's what this request is for. Inside that building are 2 refrigerated cold storage facilities, some small office space, and a work area where seafood can be handled out of the sun, especially in the summertime. And that's what that request there is for $1,523,000 to replace that building at the Portsmouth Commercial Fish Pier. And that's what we have.
Excuse me, how large is the building in Portsmouth on the fishing pier? The fish pier, as far as square feet?
5,600?
5,600. I drew a blank there for a second.
And is the cost just to replace the building or the building and the equipment inside, including?
There is some equipment. If I can give you a little bit more background.
Please.
Originally, we had been planning on building a whole new building and thinking about relocating it on the property to make the facility more efficient for trucks loading and unloading. But when we were doing the seawall, because it was so close to the edge of the wall, when we dug down alongside of it, we realized that the footings were in really good shape. During the project, because of the pile driving and the heavy equipment running around, the floor drain in the 2 coolers and in the work area failed. They were old and vibrating, everything, they failed. So we went in and saw cut the floor out to replace the drains, and we didn't have any as-built of the building. We thought there was 8 or 10 inches of concrete in the floor, and found out that the floor was 19 inches thick. So we put in new floor drains. We've got new utilities going in there now, water and electricity. It's all been upgraded. So we stepped back and say, why do we want to reinvent the wheel here? Why don't we just replace the building on the existing footprint, because the foundation utilities are all still there. So that's why we came up with a much reduced estimate on what needs to be done. The only caveat with the building is that back in the 70s, when the state bought this piece of property, the state bought the shoreline on Pierce Island from the city of Portsmouth for $1. And then they built a revetment, and they and when they dredged for the fish pier, that was where they disposed of the spoils, which made the actual land that the facility is on. In that purchase of the property, there are a couple of deed restrictions. One is if it's ever not used for commercial fishing, reverts back to the city. And two is that any structures on the facility have to be architecturally compatible with the neighborhood. So that's one of the things that we will have to work with the city on, because it's located in the historic district of Portsmouth, and you know, we have an obligation to make those facilities compatible with the city.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I'm just going to note that it's quite rare that the capital budget hearings are concluded with a husband and wife tag team. And so I certainly appreciate that.
Well, she is the smarter of the two of us,
It's,
Commissioner.
well, you said that, not me.
I know my place. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and especially a lot of thanks to Steve and Chris for helping me out as I venture on in this position.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And with that, I just want to give a couple of thank yous. First to our legislative side, both from the Senate and the House, for attending these hearings and participating. I think there's even we have people here who are decided not to run again, but they still care enough about what goes on in the state of New Hampshire to spend a beautiful summer day here with us over the last 2 days. So
We just love Charlie.
thank you very much. Also like to thank a huge shout out not only to all the members of the committee, but especially Department of Administrative Services, who did a fantastic job despite even last minute changes, major changes at the last minute, and handled it in an extremely professional way. So couldn't have done it without you. Thank you.
It's worth noting that Dawn Howe did a ton of work on the logistical side, and then Michelle Caraway and her team does a lot of work, and I just sit here.
And just for those who may be listening in, if you could just touch on, now that you've heard all of this from the governor's perspective, what happens now with all the information you got?
Well, with all the information we got now, we go back and I talk to the governor and we go through, and his target is 125 million. So we need to whittle down what was roughly 330 million down to 125 million. He then makes that recommendation to the legislature, and the legislature takes it from there. And then, with any luck, the governor will see it on the back end. And with that, the governor's capital budget hearing is adjourned.